Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Hot Path Show. Today we are on episode 21.
Yeah.
Got to get the little 21 sound effect in there. Anyways, I'm joined here by Danny. Welcome in, Danny. How's it going today?
Amazing. Absolutely
Wonderful.
amazing.
You're,
Yes.
you're telling me how you just got released out of the Unity offices and had to sprint your way home, basically.
Well, not the Unity office. I had lunch with some of the Unity people. We went out eating.
You had
It was good.
lunch at, what is it, like 10 p.m. for you?
Well, okay, not lunch, more like dinner. A light snack.
You had an 8-hour lunch break over at Unity.
Yeah, that's when we stop go for a lunch break.
I like it. I like it a lot. Well, I think we'll just go ahead and roll right into our Prefetch little warm-up topic here, and then can get into some of our other miscellaneous announcements and all that. So, anyways, for the Prefetch, I don't really have like a kind of topic. I came across a Danish meme that I wanted to share with you. I was gonna send it to you. But I'm like, you know what? It'll be a little bit better if I could just share it with you live on air here and kind of explain to me what's going on if you're aware of this
Did a live reaction.
situation. Yeah. So basically, the idea here is it was a Twitter post, and I'll explain the context and then put it up on screen here. So it's a Twitter post from BBC News that says Denmark recalls Korean ramen for being too spicy. Okay.
I heard this.
And then here's the meme. So it's Danes in 824 AD. We got the Chad Doge here. We will crush all who oppose us. We fear no man. Thor be with us. And Danes in 2024 AD. Help, noodle burn my mouth. And we have sad Doge here.
The funny thing is, I still have some left in my cupboard. I like those. I'm a really big fan of it, specifically these
I was
movies.
gonna say, I think I've like heard. I think you've like been chatting with you one time while you were eating these or something.
Exactly. No, we definitely chatted while I ate one of these.
So what's going on? They're banned now. They're black market
From what I've
available
heard,
only.
I've not noticed them being gone. I should check. uh, that's a bummer. And also, kind of that meme is a good fit. Because oh my god, the amount of Danes that don't tolerate any spice at all is stacking like really high, really high. All like even if something says it's spicy Danish food at like a Danish restaurant, or you go out eating or to a family gathering, it's all just not spicy.
It's like barely anything, but they're still
Yeah,
like
it's-
warning, warning.
Yeah, and my mom will perceive it as very spicy. It's just not. That, however, is very spicy. But
These Korean noodles here.
yeah, those are very spicy, but they are so good. It's
That's
like one of
funny.
the. I heard the reason that humans like spicy food is just because it gets the adrenaline running, and therefore it's actually your brain goes, ooh, this is a good experience. This is fun, even though you're like
You get like a
burning.
little sweat going. You feel like you're getting a crazy workout in, but really you're just sitting at home eating spicy noodles.
Yes.
That's funny. So, and then I guess like, I mean, has your family, I'm assuming, has been in Denmark for like several generations. So you have presumably Viking blood in you. Is that right?
I would assume so. Yeah, they are very Danish. My family, not even Swedish blood.
Just pure Danish.
Yes.
Very good. Well, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to share that with you and see what was going on with that, but I thought it was funny. Yeah, so anyways, we can go ahead and move along here. Just have a couple quick miscellaneous announcements, and actually I can probably pop this back up on stage here. To remind you all that we are going to be hosting a game jam in the month of July. This is the Turbo Makes Games Dots Game Jam. So you remember earlier in the year we did a community challenge where I challenged everybody to create Conway's Game of Life using Unity, Dots, and ECS. This time around it's going to be a little bit more of a proper game jam. So it's going to be running from July 5th to July 15th. And Well, actually, July 14th, I think, is the end date. It's basically the end of the 14th at midnight Pacific time, essentially, is what I did with that. But yeah, so it's July 5th. It's going to be on the Hot Path show for that day. We're going to be announcing the theme. And then after that, you basically have 10 days. So you basically it's going to span the course of 2 weekends to create a game using dots and ECS based off of the theme. And we kind of have some rules and some of the judging categories and everything available on the Jam page. And I hope I put a link in the description. If not, I'll just go ahead and post one in the chat and put one there later. So yeah, hopefully we get some good signups and some good submissions here. So definitely looking forward to this one. I know, Danny, you said that you are going to be doing a little bit of a summer camp kind of during this time, but yeah, are you going to be able to maybe participate for the first 2 days or something?
I hope I can.
It'll be a busy time for you for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, 2 days is normally what you get with a game jam, so it wouldn't be that different from a game jam. The only difference is I also at the same time have to make a what's it called, tutorial game for the event itself, the camp.
Well, hey, maybe you could use the game jam as a way to make the tutorial game.
I don't want to teach.
It'll probably be something different. Yeah,
16 to 19-year-olds that don't know programming how to use dots.
True. Yeah. Just right into the fire with it.
I'm an advocate for dots, not for pain. Okay, maybe with the spicy noodles, but
nice, good callback. But yeah, so once again, go check out the TurboMax Games Dots Game Jam. It should be very fun. Also want to remind you all that we do have a clips channel, the Hot Path Show Clips. I recently started posting some things back on here again. So I have, Danny, when you showed us the split screen multiplayer in Dots, I clipped that just kind of that tutorial portion out and put it up there. Also showing off Tobias's Vertex shader animations that he created for his game Just Read the Instructions. So some cool things on there. And I have a bunch of other videos queued up that will be going live over the coming weeks. So don't forget to check out the Hot Path Show Clips channel. So moving on over to some other cool stuff. So once again, I do want to remind you that Unite is happening this year in Barcelona, Spain, September 18th to the 20th. I am going to be in attendance there. We do even have the TurboMax Games logo on the Unite page right here, along with some of other people like Code Monkey, Speed Tutor, Useless Game Dev, Jasper Dev. So some cool people. And I know there's some other kind of tutorial.
2 for 5 teaching dots on that list.
What's that?
2 for 5 teaching.
Yeah. Oh, pretty good. And yeah, I do know there's some other kind of content creators and tutorial creators and stuff who are going to be in attendance at Unite as well. And I just want to point this out because there is early bird pricing going on, I believe, through the end of the month. So if you are wanting to go to Unite, I would recommend getting your pass earlier than later. It is a little bit of a pricey conference, but yeah, if you do want a pretty substantial discount on it, would recommend getting it earlier rather than later. So Danny, you know if you're going to Unite yet?
I don't know. I want to. It all has to do with internals.
Yeah, I get it.
Try.
I think it would be a huge misstep if they didn't have you there. So I do hope that you are going to be in attendance there. Yeah.
I'm definitely also trying to submit a talk. So let's see how that goes as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. But you never know.
I'm still trying to see if we can get the Hot Path show at Unite, but we'll see if they have room for us.
Yeah, I think isn't it more days this time around, because last year it was 1 day.
Yeah, so it's kind of 3 days, but then I was like looking at some of the schedule things that some people have sent me, and it sounds like it's kind of just still mostly 1 day, but there's like other stuff happening on the day before and the day after. So
Okay.
So,
We'll see.
anyways,
We'll see.
yeah,
We'll see.
I think the official schedule, as far as like all the talks and everything, hasn't been released yet. So, we'll see how that all ends up playing out and everything. But yeah, Unite Barcelona, September 18th to the 20th. I will be there hanging out with you all. So then also do want to point out that the Unity recently released a Dots ebook. Tobias and I kind of talked a little bit about this last week. We kind of went through some of the sections on there. And by the way, Danny, I see that you are listed
I was
as
about to ask, did you notice?
one of the co-collaborators. I noticed that immediately.
Yeah. Right there, front and center.
So yeah, do you what was kind of your I guess what did you contribute to this, if you kind of remember? Was it just kind of like Brian was just asking you some things, or did you actually write some sections at all? Or
Brian wasn't involved initially, actually, interestingly.
Even though the main author, Brian will.
Exactly. Yeah, that's quite the thing. So initially it was actually just a proposal from the learning team, the ones making all these ebooks, that they wanted to do a Dots book. And then Nick Lever and I were put in a meeting together with Thomas, who does these learning books.
Okay.
And then it was just us, me going like, what should we have in the book? What, how should we teach the things in the book? And then it was Nick Lever who initially wrote it. And then at some point it was like, okay, we need to move some stuff around, make it more like clear what the Dots part are, like focus really on the ECS as well. And that was Brian Will who rewrote that. So I was part of the initial planning and content, and also like how things should be ordered. And I was part of a lot of the discussions as well of the book.
Cool. Yeah. I think it's the ordering of it all kind of like makes sense. It starts off basically by just kind of talking about what kind of performance is in the modern day of computing, and why does these kind of things matter, some of the data oriented solutions just kind of in general, and then goes over like some of the Unity specific things, talks about the like specific Unity packages and how Unity kind of solves them. He's like a good introduction to these things. Points you towards some resources for the ECS samples. And then kind of down towards the end, it kind of gives you a little bit of information about, evaluating Dots for your project, if it makes sense for the type of game that you're making. Shows kind of some examples of some projects that took advantage of Dots, and then kind of closes it out with some just other interesting information about just, again, kind of going a little bit more into detail in some of these like general good computing topics. So I think it's, overall a really good introduction to a lot of these Dots and ECS topics. Definitely something that I'm going to be recommending to people if they're, starting to get involved in Dots and ECS stuff. But yeah, a lot of good information in here for sure. So I'm super excited this is out.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll just go ahead and post a link in the chat here, and hopefully remember to put up a link in there. And then also just real quick, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on this, but speaking of ebooks, Unity did put out another one for the definitive guide to animation in Unity. This one's pretty long. It's over 120 pages. And a lot of just kind of animation stuff. I think this got released like literally today or yesterday, so I haven't had any chance to even really scroll through this or anything. But definitely like a lot of information here as far as animation stuff is concerned. I don't know if you saw this at all. Did you, Danny?
Not at all. No. Busy bee here.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on in the Unity factory. So
Yes.
I'll go ahead and post that link in there as well. Okay, so what do we have next? Yeah, and then just wanted to remind you that, of course, if you do want to, you can support the Hot Path Show over on Patreon. We do a couple, extra bonus episodes and things like this for the people who do support us. So I put up a video recently talking about specialization in game development and why I think it's really good that you should specialize in something, but also have like really good kind of general knowledge of other things, because in my experience, the specialization has been like the thing that has kind of like gotten me, gotten my foot in the door for different opportunities. And then kind of my general knowledge of like a wide variety of things has been like really key in allowing me to stay on projects for longer periods of time, just because I can help out with more things really. So it was just kind of a good video, just kind of talking about that. And then also I did another one for people at the L2 cash tier and up, talking about kind of the future of what I have planned for the Turbo Makes Games channel, the Hot Path Show, and all kinds of cool things. So go ahead and check that out on Patreon, as well as through YouTube memberships. All the perks are the same. It's just kind of wherever you do want to support us if you want. And by the way, I do also want to mention that because we got the Game Jam coming up, if you're at the L1 cash tier or up, again on Patreon as well as YouTube, then I'll be basically playing any game that's submitted to the Jam if you're at that level or above on stream. And then, hopefully depending on, how many submissions we get or whatever, definitely want to play some more of the games on stream, because I think that would be fun. So anyways, we can go ahead and get into kind of some of our topics of discussion related to Unity Dots and all that. So we'll go ahead and start with our cash hit, which is the Unity Dots quick tip of the week. So I'm going to be taking over that today. And actually, Danny, I forgot to ask you, because you're going to be taking over the main topic for today. So while I get my screen share ready, why don't you just give a quick introduction into the main topic that you're going to be talking about a little later here.
Sure thing. Yeah, the plan today is that I will go over just initially what IJobEntity is, IJobChunk, and then once we have a okay understanding of that, or at least I've showed it, then we'll start digging into how the IJobEntity source generator works under the hood. So a few episodes ago, we did go into how source generation works, and this is sort of a more advanced version of that, like a continuation almost. So I'll show how IJobEntity itself is generated, how we also need something called the system generator, how they play together, stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. And I know one topic that you and some other people in the community have wanted us to do is kind of a replacement to doing some type of iAspect type thing, and I think this would be a good kind of precursor into that as we get kind of deeper into these source generation topics. So yeah. Okay, with that, I just want to share the Unity Dots quick tip of the week. So this is just a little project that I just started on the other day. Just give you a quick little overview about what's going on here. So I made, as you can see, a little car controller. I did kind of the classic, basically large sphere, where we have kind of a large sphere as the car controller here. It's a little slippery, little more drifty than I want, so I got a little bit of fine tuning to do. But basically, the idea is we have this kind of large sphere which kind of handles the car controller, and then we just kind of have this like visual of a car basically mapped to it here. So what I wanted to just kind of showcase here is I do just want to point out that the Unity physics library has some kind of physics extensions for applying different forces. This is something when I started learning, dots and ECS type topics, this is something that I didn't immediately find right away, because there's no just kind of like, rigid body.add force kind of thing. So they're actually in extension methods off of the specifically for adding forces, their extension methods off of the physics velocity component. So for example, we have this apply angular impulse, which is kind of how I'm applying that rotational force to that big sphere so it can kind of roll along. Now, if we kind of go into the physics components extensions here, you see that we don't have maybe like all the same options that we do as far as the regular the like rigid body dot add forces, you know, how there's kind of like different types of forces that can be added, like explosive forces and impulse and acceleration and kind of regular forces. But really, they're all kind of the same thing, but they're just like different, you know, factors that we need to, you know, consider in the calculation. So an angular, like an impulse, is just kind of like a force given like at one time, like a kind of like a blast, which I believe in this case it also does factor in the mass of the component. But if we want to apply an acceleration, which is kind of like a force distributed over time, well, really what we can do is apply these impulses each frame over time, and just kind of like, you know, changing the force as needed. And then often we're also going to be multiplying it by the delta time, to, you know, again, kind of distribute that big force over, you know, a period of time. And then, so yeah, a lot of times, again, because you don't have all the exact methods and everything you need, you know, it's really helpful to kind of go in here and see like what these things are doing, because you can see that all an angular impulse is doing is just going to the velocity data and then adding this impulse multiplied by the mass data dot inverse inertia, to the angular velocity, basically. So, you know, kind of going into the source code a little bit, it's actually pretty easy to see how you can, you know, add different forces. Again, if these are just kind of, you know, linear forces, where you're saying, you know, we can go into this one here, where it's literally just, you know, taking the regular linear velocity and then adding an impulse to it. And then again, just kind of knowing that if you want to do that over time, then again, you can just kind of do it, you know, frame by frame over time. So I do just kind of want to point that out, that these physics component extensions do exist. And, you know, if you do want to add different types of forces and stuff, it can be very helpful to kind of go into some of the source code here and just kind of see what they're doing and modify it to your needs. So I think, for example, there's actually another one where you can apply forces in world space coordinates. But I think there was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something that I didn't exactly like the way how it was implemented. So I kind of just went into the source code and then kind of yanked out the portions of it that I needed, where we're just kind of, again, doing a little bit of like 3D math on some things, to, you know, get the force into the correct world space and then apply the impulse in the way that we want it to. And then basically the result is that, you know, I can come over here and then, you know, now no matter which orientation the sphere or the car or whatever is in, you know, whichever way that I'm going to be, you know, pressing the controls, we're, you know, adding the force in the correct direction, so it all makes sense. So yeah, just kind of like a little bit of a ramble on some things. Just kind of wanted to let people know about that. Danny, do you have any kind of thoughts on this? Is the physics extension something that you kind of use when you're dealing with these types of things?
Yeah, I actually mostly just use them for figuring out how they work under the hood, and then just do the thing that was under the hood so that I have more control.
Yeah. And as you can see, yeah, for the most part, you know, they're pretty simple, where it's just, you know, literally setting the, you know, velocity components or whatever. So yeah, I know that was kind of one thing that, you know, it seems like this big scary thing, like, oh, we're like, you know, adding forces and applying forces, but, you know, really we're just kind of like setting some data on the velocity components, and then the physics, you know, system just kind of takes the rest from there.
Yeah, and it works great because it's all stateless, so it is literally just changing data. It's not like it needs to update a cache somewhere or.
True.
Yeah.
True. All right. So let's see. What does this say? If you want to set velocity, think collision triggers, custom velocity change, would you go through physicsworld.set linear velocity? That is definitely one option. So yeah, you can either kind of set it directly if you have access to the component, or yeah, doing the set linear velocity on the body index. But you do, of course, need the body index of that other one that you need. Cool. Sounds good to me. So yeah, that is our dots quick tip of the week. Next thing that we can do is move over into our context switch, where I'm going to be, actually we can do this, and oh, wrong screen. Try to figure out where I am here. This. And this is what I want. Okay. Yeah, just real quick, I want to point out that Unity ECS has a new version that was just released the other week. So this is version 1.2.3, very fun version, 1.2.3 there. Pretty minor update with, just kind of regular, simple little bug fixes, but a couple interesting things that I do want to kind of pick your brain about. So one of the items in here is cross-world selection in entities hierarchy. Do you know what that is all about? I hadn't really got a chance to kind of experiment around with what exactly that means. Cross-world selection.
I don't know. I mean, it must be related to the fact that we have global entity IDs now. So all of all entities are globally allocated. That means that we can actually, like for instance, from a debugger, know just by the entity which world it's in, what chunk, etc. So we can actually pick out the right entity data instead of just assuming that we have the right one by just picking the first world, which is what it did before.
Gotcha.
I think actually that's what it did initially when you, like, you know how you in the entities hierarchy can pick which world you're in? I think it just initially picked the first world, even though you were in another world showing other entities. I think if you try to select one of those, it might actually just show a wrong one. But don't quote me on that.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I was just curious about that one. Let's see. We've also fixed a crash on quit in players due to incorrect runtime content manager cleanup timing. So I think I've definitely ran into that one where I like exited play mode or something and the game crashed. All right, what is the deal with this one here? It literally is just a bullet point. Starts off with a lowercase r. It says respond to much docs feedback.
I mean, that is very likely just someone that changed a lot of things in docs, and on every PR that we write, we have to change. We have to write a changelog item, and so that was the changelog item matching that.
I think someone might have posted a screenshot of that in the Discord with the little Doge meme. Much docs.
I mean, what would you write there?
I mean, it's just a funny way to word it, and then
yeah. No, I agree.
So yeah, and then the last one is creating a cycle with update in-group attributes now throws an exception instead of crashing the editor. So I thought that was a silly one, but also a nice one to have. And then the other packages don't really have any other updates. The only other one that I found is the Unity Physics package, which just says integrity checks are now under the project settings. So they just kind of changed where that is basically, but all the other packages really have the updated entities packages dependencies. So got a new minor version of ECS available, but not a whole lot of crazy changes on there. Danny, you got any thoughts on that before we move on?
No,
cool.
I don't think so.
Sounds good to me. Well, with that, we can get into the instruction set, kind of our main portion of the show here, where, Danny, you're going to be showing us how IJobEntity works. So, I guess before you get into kind of how it works and all, maybe just kind of give a quick introduction into what IJobEntity is, the problem that it is trying to solve, kind of the reason that you kind of created IJobEntity, because from what I understand, you're kind of one of the main authors of IJobEntity. You're the creator of it.
Well, I mean, initially it was written by someone else. It was actually a proposal before I even joined the company.
Okay.
Then someone initially wrote it out and did some of the implementation and didn't finish or added any error messages. So it would just, just like an AI can hallucinate things, it too would do that. Come up with code. Just, that wouldn't work necessarily. Yeah, it was pretty bad. So I initially came in and that was my very first task working at Unity was
Wow.
making, understanding source generators, making it work in all the use cases. And then at this point, so much of it has been rewritten that the original author doesn't know how it works, and I'm the only maintainer of it. So, yeah. I think I need to show some code. I am not quite done writing the example yet, which is a little bit of a problem. Busy work week, but I think I can share my screen and then we go from there because I do.
Awesome.
Then I can at least show why this is so hard or why we have IJobEntity, because it's a lot of code to write manually.
Yeah, definitely. No, and that's kind of like one thing that I was talking to you about this a little bit earlier. About how, like, now that you've introduced us to the concept of source generators, this is something that I've kind of like been experimenting around with a little bit myself, and seen some other people in the community doing so as well. But that's one thing that I quickly found out is when you're writing source generators, you don't have access to all the generated code, all the awesome stuff that you've created for us with IJobEntity as well as System API. So anytime you want to say query across a group of entities, well, you have to manually create a query for that, get all the actually component data in array and kind of modify that there directly. Rather than doing all these like super nice things by creating an IJobEntity or the idiomatic for each, where you can say system API.query and just get access to the components. So it really kind of like makes you grateful for all the hard work you guys have been putting in, because it is so much easier to write code that way as opposed to writing it all out manually and everything.
Yeah. Okay, entire screen, share screen. There we go. And I will first jump into Unity, and I should probably comment out the code that I have right here initially. Well, it is not quite ready yet, but it will be when we explain it. So IJobEntity is like one of the first ways that you sort of learn. Like most people, I think, in this group does know what an IJobEntity is. It's sort of the one of the first ways you now should write a IJob. If you want to write a multi-threaded thing in dots and you want it to work with entities, it's sort of the first thing you learn. One moment while I throw away my cat. There we go.
That's going on the Clips channel.
So if I want to make this cube here spin, I can simply, make a thing that has a component, and then it will, you can write a system, and that system you invoke and schedule a job, and then that job is can go looking for a bunch of components. And it's sort of meant to be like an easy way to write this, because there's a lot of boilerplate. So I can just show what this thing does. Spins the cube. Some of you might remember this project from an earlier episode. Anyways, this cube spins. It's very nice. And the way that it was simply written is that you have this IJobEntity here. I can have fields on it because it's a struct, and I can write this execute, and I can put in some arguments, and those arguments will then automatically be filled in, and execute will also be called. So you, when you write your job, just need to do .schedule on your job, and it will figure out the right sort of things to pass into the job. It will make sure to only look for things that have both a local transform, a rotation speed, and then it will do, your code, in this case, doing the rotation. But under the hood, it actually does a lot of things. And the way that it does that is using something called IJobChunk. IJobChunk is just a lower interface, because the way that entities works is that it's what's known as an archetype-based entity component system. There are others like a sparse set one, but we have everything in entities allocated by chunk, and so therefore going over every chunk is the responsibility of IJobChunk in this case. It just iterates over every one of them, and that's very nice. It means that we can write out this code here, and we have to fill in this execute. And in this case, if we look, IJobChunk is actually a proper interface, one you have to implement. So you have to implement this little call here. This is then where you get the chunk you're currently iterating over, the chunk index, and other wacky settings that you don't really have to think about if you don't know what it is. Now, the problem here is, when you get a chunk, you don't really get the data in that chunk. You sort of have to have a way of accessing it. And so you can do chunk.get native array, and it has plenty of overloads, like one from entity type handle, one for a component type handle. In either case, it will give you back a native array, and that native array is then over whatever your component type handle is. So if you have a component type handle of local transform, it will give you an array of local transforms. Same with rotation speed, it will give you an array of rotation speeds. Now, you obviously then get, because it's a native array, what you get is just 128 max amount of indices to go into, because a chunk can only at maximum store 128 entities. One of the reasons being enableable components, which is handled by this one. But yeah, it then is on us to actually make sure that we iterate over it. And I don't know why my for loop is wrong.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Let's see. Am I maybe defining it twice? Is it just because there's a wrong invocation in here? Okay, so my for loop is not wrong anymore. That's nice. Yeah, I have to do this annoying thing here, so that I actually have my transform, my rotation speed there, and then I have my transform array. So therefore, this gives me my transform array. And there's a reason that the code looks like the way that it did right there. I'll come back to that in a second. Flow delta time. Good. So I hope you can sort of see how this is equivalent to what this is. Like we're still wanting to change a local transform and a rotation speed, which are these two. We just have to get component type handles, and then from the chunk we get, using the component type handles, an array of that, and loop over every entity in that chunk, and then do the operation. So this here is basically the inside of an execute. Now, obviously, this is a lot to type, and furthermore, this is only the code that you have to type in the IJobEntity itself. Now, if I want to schedule an IJobChunk, I would still have to go up here, new manual spinning cube job. I would have to pass in not only the delta time of these calls, but I would also have to type in this code here, which, yeah, that's correct. Because you can actually use system API here. And actually I should, because you have to update a component type handle every frame. So I should use it in this case. But there is more under the hood. If you actually want to make a component type handle work, you have to save it in an onCreate and then only update it in your onUpdate. It will actually yell at me if I only did the state.get component type handle.
What would be like the succinct way that you would describe what a component type handle actually is?
It's basically just a index into the actual chunk. It's just a thing that figures out where in the chunk is this component.
Gotcha.
Because the chunk is just like a block of memory in
Right.
actuality, right?
So it's kind of like a pointer to the location within that chunk where all those component types are going to be, right?
In a way.
That'd be a fair way to put it.
Yeah. There's some more stuff under the hood if you actually go into how get in native array works, but you can essentially think of it as like an index into where it is in the chunk, like where that given type is in the chunk. Anyways, now that I have to schedule it, I have to pass it an entity query. So I'm gonna do the quickest way of making one, but normally there's also, a lot of manual code to write one of those. Query builder. And this is actually one of the main hurdles that if you try to write your own source generator, you might realize that you have to make all of this yourself.
Yep.
Because you cannot, from a source generator, just assume that this works. Then I have to pass in a job handle. And in this case, I want state.dependency so that I wait for all jobs that this job is dependent on first to complete before running the job. And I also want to make sure that anyone else can do that very thing. Boom, boom. So this is all the code I have to write here. And it's not even all of it. Technically speaking, all of these system API calls themselves also have, a lower level implementation that is
because that's all generated stuff. Yeah.
Like for instance, with system API get component type handle, it's literally just making a field on your system and then assigning it to that field. Like doing state.get component type handle, assign to that field, then on update in your on update. But the basic gist is that we now finally wrote it out. But there's a big difference between what I wrote here and what I wrote there. So the scheduling is a lot more complicated. And also the job itself, which was this, is in an IJob chunk, all of this. And actually it's more than that because I'm not reassigning it afterwards. So technically I should also do what? Yeah. Copilot helping me out there. Yes. Also now it will spin twice, so I shouldn't do that. And actually, if we want to see how something works in SourceGen, in an early episode, I did show how in Writer you can do this neat little trick of saying show generated code. And it will show it, and in Visual Studio this doesn't work, but there's a little define you can use, which you can find in our changelog, called enable SourceGen output, I think it is.
When does the actual code generation take place? Like, do you have to go back over to Unity and hit Control R to run the generator, or does it pretty much happen almost as you're typing it?
It both. So in what's it called? Writer, it will actually have its own instance of .NET and run the source generator there, which is why this works, so we can see it. Now, as for Unity itself, it will do it anytime a compilation or domain reload happens. Because as part of the compilation process, it will, start compilation once, and then it will call all of your analyzers and your source generators, and it will then re-trigger compilation again. And this is also why it's not allowed for a source generator to regenerate another source generator's code, because that would mean that you basically had to keep running compilation steps until it has compiled everything, and that would just be extremely slow. Our source generators are already slow, so
I've noticed
that would be a massive cost we don't want. But yeah, so if we actually look here at how spinning cube this IJobEntity is implemented, the reason that we have to type out partial every time is actually because we need to generate a type that overlaps with this one. So you can see here, this type has the exact same namespace as this type. Now in this case, I don't have it wrapped in an actual namespace, but if I did have it wrapped in a namespace, then the generated code in here would also have to wrap it in a namespace, which is, by the way, a pain in the neck to get right. But that's besides the point. If we look in here, I am essentially doing the same thing that we just talked about. The only difference is here it's done with pointers instead of a native array. And if we have a enableable component, then we do even more advanced stuff. which is all of this below. But no matter which path it takes, it still ends up just being an invoke to the method that you made, the execute that you wrote. Because this method here essentially lives on the job you wrote. And not only that, the job you wrote right here, while it looks like it only has the size of delta time, which is a float, it actually has the size of the float plus the component type handles,
Right.
which we can see there, because it actually generates this internal structure, and you can see that those actually have these. And funny enough, if you notice all of these names, that's why it has those long names. I didn't type those. I just copied here and made them proper.
Yeah.
But in either case, that's like half of it. Another half of it is this internal compiler query handle and data is also what I then use to have an easy way to generate the matching query for it. So if we look at this type, it has a default query. And this invoke here makes sure that we have an entity query for this, chop, so that we can do the schedule. Because that's the other part of this. We don't only generate the code in here. We don't only run the IJobEntity generator. We also run one generating this code here. The problem, and it's a really annoying problem, they can't talk with each other. Two generators can't really talk with each other. So they just have to assume things from each other. And the way that you kind of go about designing that is just that you have to think of it almost like a protocol. Essentially, the system generator, the generator that will generate stuff for the system, has to just assume that anytime it sees an IJobEntity, it can call certain API, like, for instance, assign queries, even if this was empty. And that's, by the way, also why you might see in here that there are some calls that are empty. Like, for instance, this one, assign entity manager. This one is only relevant if you were doing managed stuff in your IJobEntity. So it's sort of like a protocol, so they can talk with each other. And if we look at the system generator, what it generated here, show generate code. Are all the spaces because my cat typed something, or are we generating something wrong? But you can see here that it did do the delta time thing, but it also is using that query that I talked about. And it actually uses that type, and it puts that on the system, which we can see a little further down here. So the type that the job generated, like, what's it called? The type on the job, it will just assume that that is always there. That any time that it sees an IJobEntity being invoked, yes, I will blame it on the cat. Anytime that I see, what's it called, a IJobEntity, I will just assume, hey, it has this type on it that I can use to store all of its variables. Which is why I know this is, plausible. I can assign a handle, and I can always on that handle call in it. So it generated all of the, bulky, annoying stuff. In onCreate for compiler is our entry point for onCreate that runs, I think, before onCreate. Yeah, it runs onCreate for compiler, runs before onCreate, so that if you had any source generated code in your onCreate, that's definitely my cat, it would actually, still work to have system API in your onCreate. So it's
Can we call onCreate for compiler if we want to?
Technically, yeah.
Or like write code in it?
No, you can't write code in this. But if you were to write oh my god, my cat is annoying right now. 1 second. Doink.
You need to throw out your cat again.
Yes. If you were to write onCreate for compiler, just like type it out, I'm sure it will actually invoke it, your code. It might just conflict with ours as well if you didn't include it in it.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
source generator code because the invoke is there twice. Yeah, so we have these two not talking with each other, but still having a contract of, I expect this one to have this. The other one doesn't expect anything of the other one, but it should make sure that it actually has what the other one assumes it always has. And this, by the way, the reason for this wrote IJobEntity.
We're losing you for a sec. I think you're back though.
Okay, great. The reason that it looks this way is that when it was written initially, IJobEntity, the system generator would just also look at all IJobEntity types, which meant that both the system generator and the IJobEntity generator both ended up doing like a full pass on the IJobEntity, which just cost so much iteration time. Yes, it is essentially destroying the router.
Cat's DDoSing your whole network.
I mean, at 2 a.m. every night, I don't have any internet, so that might explain it. Okay, so I am now going to show how the code underneath works. Hopefully we know sort of how things work now on this side of things. If I just open up the entities package, now I have just yoinked the library/package cache entities package and put it inside the packages folder of my project. Then I can open Unity entities, find source generators, and this is the same pattern that we used the last time I talked about source generators. The thing where we have a folder inside, underneath, and then all the DLLs up here.
Right.
And a folder containing all of that. So underneath here is where we actually have the solution file for our generator and all of, what it relates to. And so you can see here there's a folder for the aspect generator. There's a folder for the job entity generator and the system generator. And can you guess what the aspect generator does?
Does it generate the aspects?
Whoa, yeah. By the way, that one is written in an entirely different style to all of the other ones.
Interesting.
Yeah. Also, entities analyzer. Those are all our analyzers. They have in their own folder. So, for instance, if you were to not type partial, the partial keyword in your IDE, not only will your IDE tell you, hey, you need to add the partial keyword on your IJobEntity system, it will also give you a, hey, I can fix it for you. And that's what a code fix is. So,
yeah, those analyzers seem super handy, especially if you're like creating your own public engine or framework or whatever that people are going to be interfacing with, because people aren't always going to know the ins and outs of things. So being able to catch those things early is super helpful.
Yes, and the nice thing here about analyzers is that is actually a thing that works in both Writer and in Visual Studio.
Yeah.
And it's actually one of the things where Visual Studio is winning, because in Writer, it only works on a per invocation basis, whereas in Visual Studio they have you right click on an item that can be code fixed, and then it will ask, hey, do you want it for this invocation, for the entire file, for the entire project, for the entire solution? And then it will try to invoke that on everything that it can find a diagnostic on, which is a lot more useful and at times required. Initially, when I wrote the analyzer, we now got errors everywhere because people weren't following the standard of the analyzers. And so writing a code fix for it is also a very quick way for you to refactor the entire code base to now, go under that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can tell the rest of the structure of this is obviously the system generator is our biggest component of all our source generators, because the system generator has to both know about IJobEntity stuff, it has to know about all the entity query enumerator, it has to know about a feature called entities for each. All of this is our entities for each code called Lambda, body rewriter, stuff like that. one of them is very long. I think it's the lambda job description one.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times during like when you see errors, you'll see a lot of these names. Like these are kind of familiar looking because it's kind of like that's the actual place that the error is kind of like going through is all these lambda body descriptions or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you manage to produce an SGI's error, it stands for source generator internal compiler error. And we have a bunch of different ICE issues. One for 003, one for 002, and it's just essentially saying which generator it is for us, so we know which one to look in, and it will have a call stack representing this. One thing to note, I recently helped CodeMonkey with an issue where his errors showed up on the wrong line, and the system
You made a video
generator
about
is
it.
actually...
Did you see it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the reason for that is that once we replace, because this on update, when we do source generated code, this might seem like an off tangent, but I promise there's a point. When we generate code here, obviously when we run this code, it's not this code that we run. We want to run the one we generated. And so we generate one, and then we add this attribute on it, and this attribute then has to match the signature of this. And then we have an IL post-processor essentially going in and copying the entire content of this IL and putting it here, which means now your initial code is no longer here. It also means that you don't get nice breakpoints or exceptions, which was CodeMonkey's issue. One way we can go about fixing that is we do #line directives, which is a feature in C# that essentially says, hey, I know you're invoking this line of code here, this schedule call. Whenever we invoke that, the source code for that, you should actually see that as being in here on line 26. So if we go in here on line 26, that's where we find it. So it's basically just correlating a mapping. Now, if anything goes wrong with this numbering, that would cause exceptions to not be thrown in the right location. Or
and
it would cause breakpoints to not hit properly, stuff like that.
The issue he was experiencing was so strange because it was pointing him to something that was like in the onDestroy method when really the error is in the onUpdate. So it was like not only off by one line, but off by one method.
But yeah, no, it can get really bad because there's multiple things that we might not always catch, and I think in one version we got it very wrong. And the worst part is of this, the reason that it's so hard to get right is that it's very hard to make a test for it. If we could just write a nice little test that validated that the breakpoints stay at this point, the point we would assume, that would be nice. But there's not really a nice way for us to figure out what a generator, like we can very easily find this line here. The problem is finding out what did the compile code, like this code here, where did it have a breakpoint, and how do we then map up the two numbers? There's some annoying test writing there that we could spend a long time writing that test, and maybe we should do that in the future. But right now we also have other things falling apart, so we want to... Yeah, it's like where is time is spent. So, okay, we sort of want to generate this, and we also want to generate IJobEntity, which therefore means that we should expect there to be a system generator for IJobEntity. Now, I actually don't remember what we called that. Is it maybe just in the system generator? So what I'm noticing here is we have entity query bulk operations, which is entities for each related, lambda jobs, entities for each related, system API, which, as you would probably expect, system API specifically, if you like, isn't it that one? I think this one exemplifies it the best. If you write hash component, system API, set component, hash component, is component enabled, all of the like basic ones, it will go in here and invoke it in a specific way.
Interesting.
Now I'm trying to find. Oh yeah, I'm sure we actually just have all of the system generator job entity code inside the job entity generator as a CS brush. Because I'm noticing this one here. You can sort of see this is some of the source code you would see in a IJobEntity generated method, like all of the schedule calls, because you can do IJobEntity schedules. You can see in here. Oh my god, my cat! I feel like that has happened a lot this stream. Yes. So if I just find this here, show generator code. Yes, you can see all the scheduling calls right there. So this match is that. So we sort of have the system generator specific parts in a similar, what's it called? In the same CS brush as the other one. Now the main entry point for the job entity generator itself is in what's known as the, I think it's the job. Do we not have a? Oh, yeah. This is the entry point. And actually, IJobEntity itself is our only incremental generator thus far. The rest of them are iSource generator. We sort of talked a little about it last time, I think. That there's a difference between an incremental generator and a source generator. And
Right.
a little into both of them. So here we just have the initializer of our incremental generator, finding all of the syntax that might look like an IJobEntity, determines if like, is this a struct? Okay, early out if it's not a struct. Is this a struct with a base list? I mean, the little colon something something. Okay, if not, early out. And so the way you have to write this is sort of you have to early out as much as you can so that you skip early enough that we haven't looked, because this is invoked by everything. Like every single piece of syntax node you have in your code, in your entire code base, this method is run. This is very much a hot path. Which is funny because we are the hot path show.
He said the name.
And then, okay, now that I'm sure that there is a base list, exactly. Now that I know that there is a base list item for IJobEntity, I should now at least check, hey, does one of the identifiers have the string IJobEntity in it? This is actually sort of another important point. When you write a source generator, you can't really try to support every language C# feature ever. It quickly becomes hard. Like, for instance, did you know that in what's it called, C#, you have this thing called global aliases you can write? So I can go up here, say global, I think using, is it global using? I think it might be global using. Yeah, global using. IJobEntity equals this, and I could call it something else like cake. And now I can write that everywhere. I mean, even this would work for this file in particular. And if I then were to use iCake, it wouldn't work. Our source generator wouldn't look for it, and that is an active choice that we have to make. Because if we weren't allowed to exit already here, it would be so much more expensive, because it would basically just include every syntax node that has a base list on it. Every struct that has a base list on it, which is a lot, right? I do further filtering than just looking for IJobEntity. I also make sure that there's a partial keyword on it. This was not initially the case. We didn't do this earlier, but I concluded if we just have an analyzer go looking, making sure that you always have a partial keyword on IJobEntities, because analyzers can run in parallel and they are run asynchronously. That's much cheaper for us to check it there, that is a proper IJobEntity and it has the partial keyword, than it is for us to do it on a source generator. So I'm also earlying out of the source generator on IJobEntity if you don't have the partial keyword. This means that now we are only doing generation on anything that we know on the syntax level has the partial keyword, is a struct with a base list, and it has IJobEntity as part of that base list. And then here, I just validate that what I found was actually an IJobEntity. Because if we notice, there's a predicate and there's a transform. The transform then has to figure out the last part when you actually have the semantic model, when you actually have type information. Does this node, this candidate that we found, does it actually match what we assumed? So I look over the base list types, and I then find from the semantic model, I get the type info type, and then do to full name, which will give me the full name with all the namespacing and everything. So that one would actually resolve the using statement that we had earlier and give you IJobEntity, no matter what sort of aliasing you were using. And then that's what we finally get the struct declaration from. And so later on, when I then call this execute for our IJobEntity generator, we know that the syntax it gets is one that contains is an actual IJobEntity, and we then have to do some further checks on that on top of it. Another important thing that we do is we constantly call this cancellation token throw if cancellation has been requested, because what's it called? If you were to use an IDE like Visual Studio, the reason that we don't support source generated, the reason that we don't support source generation in Visual Studio is actually just because Visual Studio is very adamant on a source generator should run every single keystroke. Not every phrase, not every time you wait a little, every keystroke. And it can only stop the previous source generator on these throw if cancellation requested. So if you don't throw this line everywhere, then
you just kind of ignore, you just have Visual Studio not run their source generation in real time, but you only run it during the builds, the compilation step, right?
Yeah. I think we want to get to a point where we are fast enough for Visual Studio to also run our generators. But getting there is very hard when their requirement is it has to run every keystroke.
Could imagine.
So you can actually see here somewhere, I think, is it this one? Yeah, this is one long line saying, hey, if you are Visual Studio, then don't run. Which is a little sad. We want to get to a point where we can support them, obviously.
Sad.
Now, okay, let's continue a little. We get the semantic model so that we can get the actual type symbol of the IJobEntity. And then we build a description from that. And then based on that description, if it is invalid, we report why it's invalid. Because you might have written 2 execute methods, you might have written no execute methods, you might have written something twice that shouldn't be allowed to be there twice. Like the stream, don't forget to press that button to expand the live stream's reach. Yes. It's a good shout out, Aya. And congrats on the recent sub count, actually.
Yeah, I know. I like that fancy check mark next to your name in chat now.
If we go... Oh yeah, you're right. That's cool. What does that mean?
Once you pass 100,000 subscribers, you can get the verified check mark.
Oh, cool. Anyways, let's look here. So basically, if we try to generate a job description, and we check it through all of the different cases of what a wrong IJobEntity can look like, and then from that we know whether it's invalid or not. And if it is invalid, then we report all of the diagnostics. An important thing that we also do here is what my manager likes to call swallowing the poison pill. You shouldn't stop generating the rest of your generator just because you saw one error. Ideally, you see all of the errors and then you report the issue before actually emitting any code. Because that means that you now get a bunch of errors that you can look at fixing all at once, instead of you fixing some piece of code and then it gives you a new error. You fix some code, gives you a new error. That would be quickly annoying. So we actually go and collect all of them at once and then report those. Look over that. I like Aya's comment there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so now we can generate it, the IJobEntity, and we basically just figure out, just because we generated the IJobEntity doesn't mean that we have the correct sort of namespace and stuff like that. So that is what this tool here helps us figure out. It just makes sure that we get all of the top and bottom craft, like all of the using statements should be correct. All of the, what's it called? Like, where is this IJobEntity in particular located, struct-wise, namespacing and everything, which is annoying to get right. That's what this one does. And I think we call this from at least 2, if not 3 places. Guess who did that?
You mean you didn't mean to type generate shemagatrikojipish?
Yeah, somehow not. I don't understand why. And then we finally add the source. And this one, output source to file, that was the thing I was talking about. If you have a specific define, this one, can't be that one. No, it's this one. We check if you have this defined in your project. If you have this defined in your project, we will also.
That's what you were showing us about how you can inspect
every single.
Yeah, Visual Studio files in Visual Studio.
So if you're in Visual Studio and you want to inspect all of the generated code, because the IDE doesn't show it to you, you can just use the generated files, and we make sure to check this define. If you have it, then in the temp generated code folder, we will emit the files, which is nice, but it costs, like, even if on like entity samples, if you have entity samples on that project, just writing out those files alone costs 1/5 of a second, but when you want it, that's every domain reload. That's quite a lot on just writing out files. We shouldn't be spending that time. And if anything in here then fails, obviously we should throw a diagnostic, and that's one of those SGIs here. This should ideally never happen in any user code, and that's why this message will also say, hey, please write to us if you see any of these. I don't know if we still have the cute little heart here. We did at some point. Oh, we removed it.
Yeah.
Bummer. This error message used to have a heart.
Yeah, I remember that. It said, we'd appreciate,
yeah.
Did you put that in?
No, actually not. That was my manager.
Oh, I thought for sure that had you written all over it, or you did like one of the :3 thing.
No, but it might as well be, because I remember one point where one of the changelogs was I had written a changelog and then it included this emoji here, the :3.
Yeah.
And someone immediately did that disappear?
You're lagging a
someone
little bit,
immediately
but
on
you're
the
here.
official. Okay, someone on the official Unity Discord actually commented, "Hey, Danny, is this you?" Just from that changelog item alone, just the free. Yeah. If that doesn't say something,
The
I don't
next
know
changelog fixes to IJobEntity. Ooh woo.
Ooh. Oh, I should hide that somewhere and put it in.
Yeah.
The new Unity logo will. Yeah. I guess I can go over some of this stuff. Like generating a job entity description basically just means getting the symbol out of it, then checking all of the members if it has an execute, then adding that to a list. If the count is not 1, that means we have a problem and we should probably report that. Because why do you have multiple executes? You should only have 1. Otherwise, we still continue, as I said, we swallow the poison pill. Actually, in this case, I guess we don't. Because we do return. So that's a problem. We technically shouldn't. But that's fine, I assume, because like, how could we ever generate the rest and know the rest if we have multiple executes or if we have 0 executes? Then we try to figure out what kind of query info it should have. We generate a bunch of parameters. We generate this type here for every single parameter in your execute. This is the thing that actually invokes that. Then based on what attributes you have, the with all, with none, etc. That is what determines what kind of query we should generate. And then once we have a type all filled out, then we know how. Where was it? Not in the IJobEntity. Down. Then we know how this one should look, like how we build our entity query. So this just collects all of that info based on the signature of your job entity parameters and based on whichever attributes you have on your IJobEntity, because you can add attributes to IJobEntity explaining what kind of query it is. And that also means that we don't have to generate any of that code in our system generator. Our system generator basically just have to assume, hey, I should store a type so that I can use a query, and I should just invoke the scheduling of the IJobEntity using that type. And then IJobEntity will have the correct sort of invocation. Like for instance, if you do schedule, this is what actually will do the schedule. So the system generator doesn't even have to know that the actual type handle lives in underscore type handle. Because if we noticed earlier, we have, I guess actually still going in this code, we have internal compiler query and handle data, and we have type handle. So we have 2 types. One type holds what needs to go into the job. The other one holds what needs to be on the system. So we should only to the job pass in this and store on the job, store type handle. And on the system, we should store this. And then the system can just call .schedule, passing in this thing, and it will do the rest of it. If that sort of made sense. It's going a little fast. New output errors. Yeah, this one is just we probably didn't go through during all of the finding all the parameters, finding all of everything. We didn't find every issue you might have had, so this makes sure that we do. Like for instance, if you have any type parameters on your IJobEntity, we yell at you saying, "Hey, we don't support generics on IJobEntity." This, by the way, is just for now. At some point, I do want to support generics on generators, and it's a lot easier than it used to be because we couldn't do that initially.
Cool.
And the main reason that we couldn't is we didn't know the scheduling point from the other. Anyways, there's a lot of reasons we couldn't do it actually. There's something about like the kind of parameter invocation you do, making sure int is what is if you use any of the different like attributes we have that you can put on your
right.
Like we have chunk in index, we have
Yeah, exactly.
Entity indexing query, entity indexing chunk. Yeah, we need to
It's
make sure that that's an
fascinating how
int,
much
otherwise
like kind
throw,
of
blah blah blah. Very
pre-processing and checking that you need to do to make sure that the code is all structured correctly and everything, even before you get into actually generating code.
yes. And the first, like as part of my first task that I got when I joined the team, was initially just all about like we had this former feature called iJob for each, which was like early entity component system days of entities. And iJob for each was, I think, ILP based. It sort of looked like an iJob entity, but it was very confusing to use, and it had all these different invocations, and it was a nightmare to maintain, and it was a mess. But we already had written so many tests for it, and those tests were, for the most part, still semi-valid. And so my task was just, hey, I should go through all of these tests, and IJobEntity had just been sort of written to half work. I should just make sure that I add all of these tests, but for the IJobEntity equivalent of that. And not only add those tests, I should also write the thing that causes test that error is not thrown, it should fail if that sort of thing. Because all of those, checks, like for instance, execute being there twice or 0 times, was not there to begin with. I should make sure that there is a test for that. So that was sort of my introduction into my first student job at Unity. I just went sort of
figure out every possible thing that could go wrong, and have a test case or error being thrown for it.
Yeah. But it was honestly one of the best ways that I feel like you can learn, because it means that you're kind of just thrown into it. It's still sort of simple because you do have the test code there. You do have the core maintainer to help you. You have like you get to not only you don't have to like fix a bug or something. You actually go through the process of writing a test out. You write a feature. You do all of these things, and you also are just thrown into the middle of it. So you just learn very quickly what needs to happen. All of the workflows, and the guy that did this to me did it also to the two other new hires we had later on. It's a very good workflow. It works very well. Yeah, this is all just making sure that we have like, oh, you have a managed component. How does a managed component look? Well, you use get managed component accessor instead of the get native array version. Oh, if you have component data, what do we do then? Like the default case, the ref and then a component. Well, we do get chunk native array. And to access that field, what do we do then? We do unsafe get ref to native array pointer. And that's, by the way, also why we have this internal compiler interface. The internal compiler interface is technically speaking public API, because it has to be, because we generate all our code in like a source generator. When it generates all code in the user's assembly.
Right.
And therefore, it also means that because it generated that in the user's assembly, now all of a sudden we have to make this public. We can't just have it internal, because then they couldn't reference or use it.
Even though it says it's internal,
and that's also why
it's really not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we have to, like, this name is long for a reason. Part of unity.entities.internal. It's called internal compiler interface. We also try to make the names themselves long and scary, like include the name unsafe.
Just to kind of dissuade people from using them, basically.
Exactly. I guess this one doesn't fit that pattern, but probably not written by me. Because I do that all the time. Some of my names have gotten very bad in here, like long, for that reason. Let's further. Also, I see someone ask, should we use that function earlier? We're talking about how we should get ref from a native array. I don't know what you mean by earlier, but if you have a
I think there was
chunk
another comment
and you
that I
want to
can
get
pull up.
again, amazing, because
I think this is the comment from earlier.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a fine way of doing the not having to copy back approach. Like obviously we are using our own pointer arithmetic approach to it. I think you could also do something similar if you're okay with using unsafe. But using get native array, I think that there's no get ref on a native array. I might be wrong, but in that case, unsafe utility it is. Okay. Is there anything in particular that you could be curious about looking at?
Ooh. I don't know.
Or chat for that matter.
Sure, yeah. See if there's anything in chat. I'm sure there's definitely a lot of. I don't know. Is there anything particularly interesting, some weird kind of use case that you had to account for that you maybe had to solve in some interesting way?
Oh, I guess I can talk about a recent performance win.
Sure.
So, because our generators are still in a way slow, but they were very, very slow. And part of the reason is still there. It's called entities for each. That one is still slow, and we can't do much about that one, because the way that one works is you can use get singleton and other stuff inside the entities for each. You can even use manage stuff. There's a bunch of special invocation you can do inside an entity for each that we have to look at every symbol for. So we look up every symbol inside of it. Not only that, we have to re-walk the tree every single time that we the way that we did replacements initially was using syntax nodes, and then we replaced incrementally the node, which meant that it had to rebuild the entire syntax tree every single time that we wanted to make a change to it. It also there was a bunch of times where we had to rewalk it, and the main symptom of that is that we wrote initially when the generator for entities for each and some of the first generators that we had were written, they were written under the thought that, hey, I just want to generate the correct syntax node, and then anything can change it at all times later on in the code. And so everyone did that, which means that you constantly have replacement code doing replacements. You could walk up and down and do replacements. And what do you then do if one thing replaced one thing? There's all this handling that had to happen. Even worse when let's say you had a system API call inside of an IJobEntity, like struct syntax wise. Then there's some ordering problem here, because we might have run the job entity part of the system generator first, and so we replaced all of the internal bit of the IJobEntity, and then later on the system API one runs, and then it looks at our now newly generator based on this IJobEntity one version, and it just goes searching for that initial candidate that it found for system API, and it now can't find it because the generated code just yoinked that code away and generated new syntax entirely. So now the original thing that we actually stored when we went looking for system API candidates is now not the thing that is actually inside the syntax tree anymore. And so we had a lookup mechanism going in and refinding that node, sort of keeping track along the way. And that was initially how everything worked. And for very good reasons, that was very, very slow, because it had to walk the entire syntax tree every time that it did that, every single replacement. So at some point, I was like, okay, what if we just put on one simple constraint? What if we can only write forward? So what if we have we have source code, right? And we have what is essentially a string builder, and that string builder then slowly builds up the correct source code, but you can never travel backwards. So that means we have to walk it correctly to begin with. But it also forces us to only walk everything once, because you then just go down the syntax tree, and as you walk down it, you emit the new syntax based on whatever is there. So if you hit IJobEntity first, you then generate IJobEntity, but the IJobEntity code would then just say, hey, I'm going to have to call the default thing you do when you look at a method. And then a method invocation would then end up calling into the system API generator. So instead, it like sort of flipped it. Instead of every module individually being the one that had one snippet and then replaced it with a new snippet, we now have this scenario where we just walk the entire tree, and it figures out based on the candidate what module it should replace using. And we can only walk forward, so we can't really replace code anymore. And this also, it did put some, it was very hard to write this new thing, because it was basically an entire refactor of our entire source generator code base.
I can imagine.
But when we finally ended up, after that fact, we had increased performance by, like in the entities code base, it was, I think, like a minute.
Dang.
Like, out of like 4 minutes iteration time or something.
Wow.
It was massive. It was a big improvement. Yeah.
No,
and I can
that's
definitely,
a super smart
if
approach
anyone
to
is
take.
writing any big generator, I can definitely recommend doing that. The hard thing to do there is just making sure that, because in the system generator we want to generate something, some line counts that corresponds with the line counts of the original owning system. We have to count that along the way as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because source code actually doesn't have a concept of line numbers. Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
I don't see any necessarily ones popping up, but there were a couple related things that I starred going along. So one annoying thing with this source generation is that they're not available in helper classes. Sometimes you just want to put some of my code that uses system API in a different class and split it up. Yeah, it would be super nice to do that, but I definitely understand there are kind of some limitations regarding the source generator on stuff like that, right?
Yeah, we did have proposals on how we might solve that. And while those would work, they would take time to implement, and we just don't have that right now. We are aware, for system API in particular, we had one epic, because everything has to be an epic, because we are in big corp world, so Jira and all that jazz. Anyways, we had one epic for, hey, system API should work in systems. Hey, system API should work in aspects. Hey, system API should work in IJobEntity. Hey, system API should work in helper methods. So helper methods has always been on our mind, but we just haven't had time to write it. And I don't know if we will continue there or what will end up happening. We know it's a problem, is my main point here. We'll see if priority change and we finally might make something, or we will get another way of doing it. Because we do recognize it being a problem that you can't do something as simple as, there's no simple way of doing get singleton without first having to create an entity query, and how do we then do that in a nice way in a helper method, etc. Creating a helper method in a nice way is actually really annoying right now, because you have to type out all that manual code all the time if you want to make it.
Yeah, exactly. So oftentimes where it's like, oh, it would be nice to have a helper method to do this, but it's like, well, no, it's actually more annoying because now I have to pass a bunch of data into this helper method, and it's like, all right, well, it's just way cleaner if I just write it in the same place that I'm already doing this.
Yeah, and it's actually helper methods are a similar problem to that of a Lambda, for instance. If you're using the UI toolkit, then a lot of it is just some actions, events that you call into, some lambdas that you have to assign. And those lambdas, if you want them to do anything related to ECS, now you have to pass in a world, capture a world into the lambda, and you have to generate all of this manual invocation. So actually solving helper methods is also about like making it accessible from other API. Like if you in a mono behavior want to do some ECS thing, that is also very hard because you are not allowed to use any system API because you don't have that helper method approach.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And another kind of similar or related thing, you had kind of mentioned testing, but by the way, is there any way to write tests for a dots game in Unity? So kind of testing more gameplay, like ECS gameplay code. So if you kind of ever do this type of thing, how do you kind of go about doing that?
I guess I can show some of the tests we have for IJobEntity. Test IJobEntity. Because we have like for a specific, especially for our source generated code, we have so many ways of writing tests. Because we want to make sure that what do we call it? Job entity tests. Component system. Sounds right. Yeah. That's the performance. Yeah, no, but I guess it's sort of similar. Yeah. So we have a test fixture for it that we can just use. And then we just write out. Where is it?
Is that test fixture available
somewhere
publicly?
in here? We write out a static method, then invokes a system. I don't know, but if it isn't, it's very easy to write one yourself as well. It seems that this is in a public namespace. It might be public.
Cool.
Don't quote me entirely, but it seems public. Why is it public? I wonder. Even the ECS text fixture itself might be public. That's nice.
Cool.
But even if it wasn't, actually creating that yourself isn't that difficult. Like you can just do class my fixture. You don't have to derive from anything. Just have to have the attribute test fixture, and then you create a big void setup, and you make sure that you have a world. No, not this way. World equals new world. And then you say, hey, is this what should, oh my god, I'm bad at typing right now because I have a cat in the way. There you go, and then you specify whether that's an edit mode system or not, edit mode world or not. Oh, I guess it's through a flag in this case. One flag. Editor or for game. So let's say it's for the editor, and then you just add in some of the default stuff. There's like a system get all system type system type index maybe. No, it's the type manager. Get or is it that system? There's something about system in here that lets you add it all at once.
Like add all the systems to your test world.
Yeah, exactly. Probably something like that. No, that's initializing it. Maybe I should make a how to test dots at some point.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good one.
Actually, what I can do, this is probably easier. I can just show how default initialization works. So the thing I was looking for is, yeah, you create a world, and then you call. Oh, okay. I guess there's no automatic way unless on one of these is public.
Mm.
Yeah, you have to recreate this yourself, but
Okay.
most of that is not that difficult to.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's this amount of code there, which is like 50 or so lines, because all of the rest of these APIs are public, and it's just about creating the right systems in the right world. And you can even go the very lazy way if you want. Where's our easiest test fix? I don't know. Did I write it there? Where did I write it? Here. If you want to be very lazy about it, you can do default, world initialization, initialize, world equals. There you go.
And then that
This
just
works.
takes care of that for you.
Yeah, and it finds the right systems to add to that world as well.
Cool. Nice. So then that way you basically have a testing world set up so that any systems that will run, they'll have like all the other systems that are needed will be running basically, right?
Exactly. I should probably use one-time setup. And yeah, so now I can just write any sort of test that I want. By simply doing public. I think they have to be static. No, they don't. Static. Public void test. Obviously that. Oh, I don't know why that works. Test. Voila, you now have a test that you can run. There's even a button for it. That's great.
Awesome.
And as for like our source generation stuff, we have 3 variations of it. Either we're testing if there's errors, if our error code works right, so are we throwing correctly, or we test, are there no errors when you write this code? The runtime thing, we test if the runtime is ready. And the 4th one is, given this piece of source code, did we generate the correct outputted code? So they are sort of the integration version of that.
So yeah, what are those attributes that you're using, the test fixture and one-time teardown, one-time setup, all that?
Test fixture basically just says to the testing framework, hey, this class is something I should look for tests in. Then you can save any variables you want inside the fixture.
And is that
And
like a C# library or?
It's in unit, yeah, but it's built in. You can just look up how to write a test in Unity for this. But then you just add this attribute and it will run setup once, and teardown will be called once as well when you put this attribute here. And then in the editor you will get in number of tests based on how many new efforts you have that have this.
And does this integrates with like the Unity's test runner, so you can see all that output in the editor and everything, right?
Yeah, I don't know if my code is compiling, but maybe I can show it. Oh, it's reloading. Please don't take long. If you if you have a Unity where you can see it, you can go into General, Window, then General, then Test Runner, and all your tests should be visible there. It might even show tests as a visible thing now. Maybe we get to see it before this Friday. We'll see.
I can I have it on mine here. Actually, yours looks like it's about maybe going.
Oh, that looked. Is it? Oh, yeah, no, there.
There you go.
So, I don't know why test is test there, but no, it's window, general, test runner. We have tests. And when you have entities installed, you will actually notice all our tests also show up here.
Oh, nice.
So if you want to see how other of our tests are written, you can go looking for that. Like for instance, if you want to see all of the tests I wrote for System API, then they're called. Really exposing myself here, I feel like. Oh my god, I know how to spell.
Next stream is going to be reviewing Danny's test code.
Oh no. Oh, maybe it's a hidden away from users. Ooh, that would be interesting. But this is hybrid. I don't see my own code in here. That's funny. Maybe it's not there. That's nice. Guess you can't see my code now.
I mean, we could probably still see it by digging through the package, right?
Oh my god, it's taking. No, I will actively try to hide it. Yeah, no.
You'll use some code obfuscation thing to scramble all the variable names and everything.
Obviously. Only sane choice. I don't know why it's not showing. Interestingly, you can just create new test assembly folder in the active
probably
path
because
if you want to create your own tests, and you don't want to set it up yourself. Yeah, no, that's it. One day Unity will be no more. And that is because my cat pressed delete.
Press delete on the source code, and somehow you guys didn't have it backed up or saved in source control or anything.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, you know that button for deleting a GitHub repo where you have to type in the name of the repo to delete something from GitHub? Yeah, my cat typed all of that in
by
accidentally.
accident. Yeah.
Yeah. Oops.
So good.
Any more questions?
I don't think so for now. Yeah. No, I think that's good. So, yeah, anything else that you wanted to say on that, or we can move on to our final portion of the show here?
No, I think we're good to go.
Cool. Sounds good to me.
The cat is pulling all the strings. Like when I'm around on other people's streams and stuff, it's actually not me. That's just my cat.
Your cat's doing all the work the whole time. Well, so what does your cat have to share for the dynamic allocation this week?
Oh, actually, do I?
I have it up for you.
Good. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. So
our generation ship was to trap.
Oh, showing. Okay.
It's off now.
Matt Gamble, who is known for a channel called Game Dev Guide, who does a bunch of great tutorials and stuff and things. Who I also got to meet last year's Unite. He finally announced a game he's been working on for a while. This was not a game jam game, clearly, as you can see by the video. Can't make that in a week. That I just wanted to show. Or actually, it was Johnny's idea to work for this one.
I saw you had commented on his post, so I figured you might want to share it with the group.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of building factory games and just building games in general, simulation games.
Yeah,
it feels like it's also a very. It feels like a good Dutch scenario, knowing him, I don't think he necessarily wrote it in dots.
Yeah, I don't think he's using dots at all. He's never talked to me about it any of the times that we've chatted about things. But yeah,
exactly.
and actually, some people may or may not know this, but Matt, again, who runs the channel Game Dev Guide, he used to do a bunch of the YouTube videos for Unity, a lot of the kind of tutorial stuff.
I didn't even
for
know.
Unity. Yeah, he was a Unity employee a while ago. But yeah, now he's working for this this team Sonderla Studios, and this is their first game. As this team, the other developers on the team have worked on some other quite notable projects prior to this. But yeah, this is kind of their debut game. It was shown at the PC Games Fest or whatever it was called.
Oh yeah, I saw.
Last week, and so yeah, it's super cool that it's he's finally revealed it, because I know they've been working quite hard at it for a while now.
Yeah, and Unity highlighted it as well.
Yeah, which is very cool. So what I wanted to share, I actually have two Twitter threads that I wanted to share. One is maybe a little bit more negative, one's maybe a little bit more positive, but this one is by Matthew Ball. I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy, but he's kind of like a, you can see his bio here. He's a, kind of entrepreneur, angel investor type guy. He wrote a book about like the metaverse a couple years ago. But he does like a lot of analysis type stuff on Twitter. So this is like a super long thread by him. It's like 30 something posts, and each of these has like more text available on them, and there's a bunch of like charts and graphs. But I think it's like
I mean,
really
some people write a article normally for this sort of thing, I feel like.
yeah.
I think that he just like
interesting format for being on Twitter, but hey, I mean, it's getting shared around and stuff. But yeah, I think it's just like a really good look at kind of what's going on in the games industry, because I mean, it shows that right now we're only 5.5 months into the year, and the game industry has already set a yearly record for layoffs of 10,900 versus the prior record, which was last year, of 10,500 layoffs. And it's not all about layoffs. It goes into, a bunch of different things related to, console sales, different types of games that people are playing. And yeah, it's just a really fascinating read. I think it's just, again, most of the stuff is kind of related to like the, AAA type, high-end, big money-making industries and all that. But I think this is still, important stuff if you are in the games industry, even if you are kind of more on the indie space, just to kind of understand what's going on in the industry, and, hopefully can kind of give you some insights into, maybe if you're kind of choosing a career path within the games industry, it kind of, some of the smart things to do or not do. So yeah, would recommend checking this out. I'll go ahead and post this in the chat, as well as put it in the description of the video. And then on a more positive note, I don't know, you probably saw this one, Danny, Will Goldstone, who is a Unity employee, put up this thread, just a much shorter thread, just kind of about his kind of inside perspective of what's going on with Unity right now. He seems to be very happy with the CEO. One of the quotes he says here is, "We're in a really positive period of change, the biggest I've seen in my 13 plus years here. We have a new CEO who's breaking down years of cultural degradation and getting us quickly to places of transparency and clarity around what is and isn't working for us as a company." And then also kind of mentions that there are some things that have kind of been in the work for quite a long time that he's super excited about, and hopefully we should be seeing soon. So yeah, just a quick little thread from Will Goldstone there, just kind of talking about what's going on over at Unity. So I'm guessing, Danny, you saw this thread?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's always like Will Goldstone has done this so many times. No. There's some internal discussions that always like, how much should he share? Because the problem we've had for a while was making so many over promises that like, if we do that can also be bad. So, I mean, I do agree with him for what like the stuff he said. The question is, like, does it help saying that? Always a skeptic.
Fair.
But yeah, no, it's
So yeah,
I'm glad
just kind of wanted to.
someone is allowed to say it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, Will's a good guy. So yeah. Anyways, with that, yeah, just wanted to kind of share some of those Twitter threads that I think people might find interesting, kind of related to stuff in the games industry. So anyways, with that, we can go ahead and kind of close out our show here, thanking our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters. Again, your support really does go a long way because we're a small little operation over here. But do just want to give a shout out to the supporters at the CPU register tier, which is our highest tier. So thank you to eCool for your support over there. I really do appreciate it. And and once again, remind you all that we are on Spotify now, so you can get the show in podcast and video form over there, and all sorts of cool stuff. So yeah, once again, that is episode 21 of the Hot Path Show. Hope you all enjoyed it.
I was very surprised when I heard that first.
I didn't tell you that one going into this.
No, I was like, do I have music playing in the background now?
Like, am I listening to a little 21 Savage going on? What's going on?
Yeah.
So yeah, any parting words for us today, Danny?
I just noticed this question. I just quickly want to.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Someone is asking, should they use this or should they use that? And the answer here, like most of this time that I answer a question, I feel like is it depends. Because something that this is very good for is you just quickly want to write something and have it work. The thing here is also all your invocations have to be exactly matching this query. So if you use one IJobEntity but pass in different parameters, which isn't something a lot of people do, but I know some people do, and it's probably something more people should do, is have one IJobEntity where the parameters can do multiple things. It is supported. Then obviously with all is not going to work if you want varying queries on that. This can be useful if you are like writing an IJobEntity and you have you want to have it work on two separate queries that don't they do match the components that they need to match for the IJobEntity to work, but at the same time they might have component A and the other has component B, but you don't want to have component C on any of them. Then you can have it call the IJobEntity twice, one where you do this on each of them. Oh, yeah, that one twice. So there's sort of a scenario of when you want to use each one of them. Query Builder can also be nice if there's some scenario we don't support with all. As for the state.dependency, I know some people can also be tripped up about state.dependency. Essentially, the rule is for IJobEntity, you don't need to pass in state.dependency, and when you don't pass it in, it implicitly means that it passes in state.dependency and it assigns it back to state.dependency. Whereas if you were to use IJob chunk, IJob4, all of the other jobs, you would have to manually specify in a job handle every single time.
Right.
And if you want it to work similar to how we do for IJobEntity, what you pass in there is normally state.dependency as the input so that we wait on all previous systems, and then we assign it back to state.dependency so that whenever someone wants to complete the given system we are in, then they just need to complete that job. Essentially, every system knows all of the jobs inside of it by its state.dependency. So yeah, that's what you have to do there. And it can sometimes be useful even for IJobEntity to write the dependency manually. If say you had two jobs scheduled inside the same system and you want those to run in parallel, then you need to do state dependency on both of them and then not assign it back to state dependency. Then you have to save it to its own variable and then save the other schedule to its own job handle variable and then do job handle.combine dependencies equals state.dependency so that you basically merge the two dependencies at the end so they can run in parallel. So yeah, that hopefully explains in detail the two parts of that.
Sweet. A little bonus question there at the end. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, yeah, once again, thanks everyone for joining us here today. It was a fun stream, and we'll see you all next week for a new episode of the Hot Path Show. Later, everybody.
Yeah. Later.